The blue light of the phone screen was the only thing holding back the shadows in the cramped studio apartment. Sophia Martinez sat at her small desk, the air heavy with the scent of stagnant coffee and dust. She tapped the screen, checked the framing, and held her breath. The silence in the room was absolute, pressing against the walls. She reached out, her finger hovering over the record button. She pressed it. A tiny red light flickered to life, the only sign that the world outside might eventually hear her. She began to speak. It was not a polished production. It was a single, unedited clip, a raw fragment of her daily life captured in the dark. She spoke to the lens as if it were a window into a different reality. When she finished, she tapped stop and watched the upload bar crawl forward. She did not know that this singular, low-resolution file was the first brick in a foundation that would eventually hold her entire future. She set the phone down and waited, the blue light fading, leaving the room in darkness once again. The views did not climb. They hovered in the double digits, month after month. Sophia posted every day. A steady rhythm of content released into a void that never replied. In the real world, the pressure shifted from silence to noise. Friends visited her studio, glanced at her empty desk, and laughed. They pointed at the lack of growth, the lack of status, and the lack of a traditional paycheck. Sophia listened, her jaw set, and said nothing. She turned away from their skepticism and reached for the worn copy of Think and Grow Rich that sat on her desk. The spine was cracked, the pages soft from constant handling. She read the same chapters until the lessons became muscle memory. When the mocking voices grew too loud, she simply opened the app, hit record, and focused on the lens. She did not defend her choices. She did not argue for her vision. She let the silence of the internet be her only witness. She kept the phone charged, the camera angled, and the routine unbroken. Every day was a test of endurance, and every day, she chose to post again, ignoring the growing gap between where she was and where she intended to be. The shift did not happen gradually. It arrived in a single violent surge. Sophia was in the middle of a mundane task when the phone on her desk began to vibrate against the wood. It was a low hum that quickly grew into a continuous, frantic buzz. She reached for it, expecting the usual silence, but the screen was a chaotic blur of red dots. Her latest video had broken the barrier. The view count was climbing so fast the numbers blurred into a single shifting digit. Within 48 hours, the tally hit 1 million. The notifications arrived like a waterfall, an endless cascade of pings, likes, and comments that lit up the room with a strobe-like effect. She swiped to clear them, but the list only grew longer. Every time she refreshed, 100 more interactions appeared. The silence that had defined her years of work was gone, replaced by the relentless noise of digital recognition. She sat back, the phone now burning in her palm, and watched the screen. The life she knew was dissolving in real time. She understood, as the counter ticked upward, that the period of being ignored had ended. The world had finally arrived at her doorstep. The digital chaos shifted. The pings of fan interactions slowed, replaced by the heavy, silent weight of corporate emails. Sophia opened her inbox to find a flood of subject lines promising thousands of dollars for simple mentions. Contracts arrived in PDF format, each one representing more money than she had earned in the previous 3 years combined. She scrolled through them, the sheer volume of digits making her eyes ache. It was a gold mine delivered straight to her screen. She closed the laptop and sat in the quiet of her studio. The room felt smaller now, crowded by the weight of the potential wealth sitting in her digital accounts. She looked at the peeling paint on the wall and the stack of unpaid bills still sitting on the corner of her desk. The numbers on her screen promised a different life. Yet she did not reach for the keyboard to accept a single deal. She stood up, walked to the small kitchenette, and boiled water for tea. The apartment remained exactly as it had been yesterday. The air smelled of stale coffee and old books. She had the contracts, she had the leverage, and she had the sudden, jarring reality of being rich on paper while her physical world remained unchanged. She sat back down, staring at the screen, and waited. The digital numbers were not enough. Sophia needed to see the physical weight of her new reality. She walked into a dealership where the air smelled of polished wax and expensive leather. She sat in the driver's seat of a low-slung sports car, her hands gripping the wheel. The engine hummed with a power that vibrated through her frame. She looked at the price tag, then at the reflection in the windshield, and climbed out, The salesman followed her, but she did not look back. Next, she toured a penthouse apartment. She walked across the hardwood floors to the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city sprawl beneath her like a map of opportunities. The rent was more than her studio cost for a year. She touched the cold glass, feeling the height and the detachment from the world below. She turned away from the view, walked to the door, and stepped back into the elevator. The descent was quiet. She took the bus back to her neighborhood, the city streets narrowing as she approached her building. She climbed the stairs, pushed open her door, and sat back down in her familiar chair. The room was small, the walls were thin, and the desk was cluttered, but it was anchored in place. She had looked at the life she could have, and decided it was not the life she needed. Her feed became a parade of excess. Other creators posted photos from the windows of private jets, the clouds below them looking like cotton wool. They flashed designer suits and gold watches, their captions screaming about living in the moment. The noise was constant, a relentless demand to show off every dollar earned. Sophia scrolled past them without pausing. Her phone buzzed. Another sponsorship check had cleared. The notification sat on her lock screen, bright and tempting. She did not open a shopping app. She did not search for flights. She opened her brokerage account instead. The interface was stark, white, and silent. She typed in the full amount of the check. Her finger hovered over the confirm button for a second, then pressed down. The money vanished from her checking account and appeared instantly as shares in a broad market index fund. She did it again when the next payment arrived, and the next. While her peers burned cash on temporary status symbols, she built a wall of assets, brick by digital brick. No one saw the graphs on her screen climbing. No one knew she owned pieces of thousands of companies while wearing the same clothes she had worn for years. The silence of her strategy was its strength. She locked the phone and placed it face down on the desk. The room was quiet, but her future was growing louder with every transaction. The cafe was loud, filled with the sharp clatter of porcelain and the hiss of steam wands. Sophia sat at a small corner table, her laptop closed. Across from her, a fellow creator leaned in, his movements restless. He held a steaming latte in one hand, the cup sleeve branded with a high-end logo. He paused, his gaze dropping to the floor. He pointed a finger at Sophia's feet. The rubber of her sneakers was peeling away from the sole, the fabric stained and frayed from years of daily transit. He let out a short, sharp laugh and shook his head. "You have the income to live like a queen," he said, his voice cutting through the ambient noise of the room. "Every brand wants you. You could be anywhere, wearing anything, doing everything." He gestured to the surrounding crowd, then back to her. "Instead, you sit here in this local shop, looking like you are struggling to make rent." He took a long sip of his drink and leaned back, his eyes searching hers for a reaction. "Why do you live like this? It does not make sense." Sophia did not flinch. She watched him, her hands folded on the table. The silence between them grew heavy, punctuated only by the rhythmic grinding of coffee beans behind the counter. He waited, his expression tight with disbelief, demanding an answer for her choices. Sophia reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. The screen was dark, reflecting the overhead cafe lights. She tapped the glass twice, swiping past her messages, and opened the brokerage app. She did not speak. She simply slid the device across the wooden table until it sat directly in front of him. The screen displayed a jagged, upward trending line that climbed steadily against a dark background. It was not a photo of a luxury car or a mountain retreat. It was a map of ownership. The creator leaned forward, his coffee cup hovering halfway to his mouth. He squinted at the numbers, the color draining from his face, as he processed the scale of the assets listed. The noise of the cafe seemed to drop away. Sophia leaned in, her gaze locked onto his eyes. "I would rather impress my future than impress strangers," she said. Her voice was steady, lacking any trace of defensiveness. The creator stared at the graph, then back at her, his lips parting as if to argue, but no sound came out. He looked down at his own phone, where a banking notification showed a high balance, but a credit card statement sat beneath it, flashing a red reminder of debt. He scrolled through his expenses in silence, the weight of his own choices suddenly visible in the flickering light of his display. The table between them held two different worlds. 5 years had passed. The office was quiet, save for the low, rhythmic hum of a desktop fan and the occasional click of a keyboard. Sophia sat in her chair, the sunlight slanting across the desk and catching the dust motes in the stagnant air. She opened her laptop, the familiar glow illuminating the room. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad. She had done this every month, tracking the slow crawl of compound interest, the steady accumulation of shares, and the disciplined reinvestment of every cent. She moved the cursor to the refresh button. She paused. Outside, the city moved in a blur of motion, but inside, the world was still. She clicked. The page stuttered, a loading bar sliding across the screen. Her pulse thrummed in her fingertips. The numbers rearranged themselves, shifting and snapping into place. Then, the screen settled. The total hit a seven-figure sum, $1 million. It was not a jackpot or a lucky break. It was the result of thousands of small, unglamorous choices stacked one on top of another. The cursor blinked next to the final digit. Steady and constant. She did not cheer. She did not stand up. She simply watched the digits hold their position, the weight of her independence finally confirmed by the cold, hard data on the screen. Sophia closed the laptop with a soft click. The room was silent. She stood up and walked to the window, the glass cool against her forehead. Below, the city sprawled in a chaotic, restless grid of lights and movement. Thousands of people below were chasing the same fleeting attention she had once sought, their paths temporary and easily erased. She looked at the horizon, tracing the outline of buildings that stood firm against the evening sky. She had traded the adrenaline of viral fame for the quiet, unyielding weight of ownership. Every dividend payment, every index fund, every asset locked away in her portfolio acted as a stone in the foundation of her life. Fame was a vapor that vanished the moment the screen went dark. Ownership was a fortress. It did not need validation from strangers or the approval of an algorithm. She watched a car weave through traffic far below, a small, frantic motion in the vast expanse of the city. She turned away from the window, the space behind her feeling solid and secure. There were no more notifications to check, no more trends to chase, and no more hunger for external validation. She had built a life that did not depend on the next click. She was finished.